Redditors who have been clinically dead, what did you experience in death, if anything? I was dead for 6 minutes. I was laying on the gurney and I was getting colder. Somewhere my body started warming up and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was not longer in pain. All the noise from it just went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly it was just black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as it was like before I was born. Then the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises. I felt this massive pain. Then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. The smell was so bad I started vomiting. I remember the DRs turning me on my side and watching my vomit spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I have ever experienced and being revived the worse. I was 19 when I had my first hip replacement surgery. Born with a bad hip. The doctor put me under and then all of a sudden it was like I was opening my eyes but felt nothing. No pain. No sadness. Nothing. Apparently I flatlined for 90 seconds due to complications. As I had my eyes open I began to rise out of my body and stand next to it. How freaky is it to see yourself from outside your body? The thing is I never let my left hand let go of my body's left hand. It felt attached the second I saw the nurse use the heart starting thing. I was jolted upright, back in my body. Not really sure what happened and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep so we took her into the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3 days her health kept deteriorating, and on the 3rd day my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night my daughter woke up and asked about grandma. No one had said anything to her or in the room with her. We asked her what did she mean. She told us that grandma came to her in a dream and said it's not your time yet, I'll go for you. Immediately the next day she was almost 100% better. That is freaking crazy. Bro, instant chills. There are some researchers who have been collecting and quantifying the data of near-death experiences, NDEs, for years now. They have created 6 categories stages of NDEs that generally sum up most experiences. 1. The hellish experience. It can be either a mildly uncomfortable experience, a cold, dark, damp, loveless experience, or the traditional flames and devil experience. Sometimes say they are drawn out of this realm by an indescribable love. Very few people recount experiencing this too. There is another type of experience where one has an out-of-body perspective and can travel freely. Oftentimes this happens in an operation room where one's heart has stopped and the doctors are working to revive the patient. The individual may be able to go to other rooms in the hospital or travel across the country. If they remain in the hospital room, they do not always recognize their own bodies on the table and can feel confused. Quick note, there have been a surge in NDEs since the 1960s when resuscitation techniques became more advanced. 3. Much like many of the other redactors' comments, there is another experience of blissful, warm darkness that just feels comfortable. It is indescribable nothingness, often without memory or any inkling of consciousness at all. 4. The next experience is similar to the last, but with an additional light that is usually far away, that emanates warmth and love and forgiveness. The individual is either attracted to this light and goes toward it, or the light itself comes to the person. It allegedly gets better and better the closer one draws to the light, and so they continue. Obviously this is where the phrase don't go to the light likely comes from. 5. This experience continues where the last leaves off, where the person has broken through the light to the other side. They now are experiencing a love, compassion, forgiveness state of consciousness that is unlike anything they can put into words. Sometimes they encounter a sort of guide. This could be a loving anonymous being or a religious figure. If they experience this, it is sometimes linked to their beliefs on earth, but not always. This experience is sometimes accompanied by the most beautiful music. This being may present them to loved ones or show them a life review. This is a very common experience of those who have had NDEs. It may be at this point where the NDE decides or is told to return to their body. There is sometimes a choice because they have work left to accomplish in their lives. And I put that last part in quotes because of how many people cite that as their reasons on coming back. 6. The final experience goes beyond the previous state of love and consciousness and is experienced only by a relatively few people compared to the previous others. They say that they experience of becoming one with the universe, universal energy that unites everything God. They have stated that they understand everything. That knowledge is known just by thinking of a topic. Anaphylaxis wasn't breathing. I considered all the hallucinations I experienced likely due to hypoxic episode until I told my mom what I saw. A middle-aged man who wasn't in scrubs standing still at the end of my bed while all staff were running around and doing their business. I was having a non-verbal conversation with him and he was telling me to calm down, focus on breathing. He wore a tropical style button-down shirt, one of those old school newsboys hats, and had a very pleasant demeanor. Mum showed me a photo of my grandpa that I never had seen before, and it was the guy at the foot of my bed, and he died before I was even born. Friend of mine described it as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away, but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she doesn't fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. Similar experience here. As you're dying, you start feeling tired in a way you never have before, or will again, until you die. The sheer act of staying alive is exhausting, but then it's all blank until I woke up from a coma a couple weeks later. You don't even remember the actual moment of death, and it takes weeks for your mind to remember everything leading up to it. I was in a ton of pain before and after because a couple of my organs were perforated, but dying itself wasn't painful. I agree that I'm also not afraid of death. Not even just because of the pain factor, but because it feels less unknown to me and there isn't time for regret when it happens. My girlfriend is anaphylactic, and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen adrenaline shot until the ambulance got there. Now obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time. So by the time the ambulance got to her school she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses freaking twats and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They give her a second direct injection of adrenaline and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing. No pulse, nothing. Dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds she was clinically dead. And the scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind it. All despite the fact her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but to also restart it with a little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. I know 3 people that have been clinically dead and have come back. What they described is something much different than what people are talking about here. They all said, if you paraphrase, that it feels as if you're passing out. Someone compared it to overdosing on whippets, nitrous oxide, a feeling of your conscience slowly getting focused into one point in the exact middle of your head, while your limbs lose feeling in a tingling, pleasant way and then you lose consciousness. One girl said that when she came back into conscience she was hallucinating because she had no idea what was going on and that she started dreaming of something safe, that is her mother hugging her in a warm bed. Not mine, but the head of my program was in a horrible car accident. She was dead for a few minutes on the scene while paramedics worked on her. She said it was the most amazing feeling she's ever experienced. It was blank nothing, but that was perfectly fine. And she felt a comfort she can't even explain. She remembers being angry at the man working on her when she finally came back to her body because she wanted to stay there. She told us she can't wait to experience it again when it's really her turn. Back in college, a very heavy-set friend of mine had some sort of cardiac event on the couch right next to me. I had been high all day long and didn't want to be there when the police were called, so I did everything in my power to get his heart pumping again. He was so pissed when his heart started back up again. Said it was an amazingly calm darkness and couldn't believe I wouldn't let him stay in it. F me for saving your life, Brian. right? A friend of mine described death. She was technically dead twice, as being surrounded by darkness and floating with some sort of warm gel-like substance covering her. She never wanted to leave that state. Oh my god, that literally described the tanks that the machines used in the Matrix. Oh freak. How interesting. I had an experience like that coming out of anesthesia after surgery. I was in a warm dark place. Perfectly comfy. Warm. Nothing hurt. No worries. Just this is nice. I think I'll stay here, and then I woke up and I was freaking cold and angry. First thing I said, when I could finally talk cause my teeth were chattering so hard, was god dang it's freaking cold in here. Then I got a shot of something in my IV and a blanket and was much warmer and much less pissy. I was electrocuted by about 13,800 volts. The doctors say it's likely the first hit stopped my heart and the second one started it, before I was pulled like a lifeless corpse to safety. I remember experiencing the darkest dark and the most silent silence. I ceased to care that I was dying. Time seemed to change. It could have been hours, it seemed. It was only about 30 seconds. I felt as though I was floating and floated towards something that I eventually realized was my body and reality. Upon joining with whatever it was I was floating towards, I became self-aware in my body and heard the electricity making horrible noises and knew I was in danger. I was dead for a very short period of time, like 30 seconds to a minute. There's a big misconception about it. It's not like sleeping at all. I'll try to explain. There's always a sort of white noise in the back of my mind. It quiets down when I sleep, but it's still there. I never noticed it before I died, but I do now. I don't want to romanticize death, but when I was out, it was like this perfect nothingness. And nothingness is so hard to imagine normally, but once you experience it, and they bring you back, part of you wishes you could have stayed. There's no positive feelings there, obviously, but it takes away everything bad too. All your stress, the nightmares, the troubles, all gone. Just nothing exists. It's beautiful in a way. I'm not suicidal at all, and hope to live the rest of a long and happy life. But I'm very much looking forward to a lack of consciousness when I do eventually pass again, and I can honestly say I don't fear death anymore. When I was 15 I was scheduled to do a tilt table test. They lean you up at an angle on a table, because I was consistently experiencing dizziness and fainting spells. After about 20 minutes the doctor tilted the table back and I could feel myself passing out. I got severe tunnel vision and lost like 95% of my eyesight, like looking through a straw, and then I blacked out. I remember hearing the doctor call the code and my father cussing at the doctor that he killed me. I remember hearing a lot of slamming and banging around, which I assumed was the crash cart and nurses shoving into this small testing room. I felt a pressure on my chest, like when you have someone stand on your back to crack it, which I found out later was the nurses doing CPR. I saw an array of vivid colors kind of dancing around, forming objects in the dark. The scariest thing was how peaceful it felt. Just pure 100% peace. No panic, no pain, no sadness, nothing, just bliss. I coded for just under 2 minutes, and as soon as I came to and opened my eyes, I felt seriously angry and hostile. I started ripping off whatever I could get my hands on and yelling at the doctor to get me off the table. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more Reddit addiction. Also leave a comment on your near-death experience and what it was like, if anything.